Joining us now is Cameron Forbes, the author of The Korean War, which has just been published, and Cameron Forbes is in Melbourne. Good morning to you, and many thanks for joining us today, Cameron Forbes.
My pleasure.
Firstly, how unpredictable is this situation that we're now facing here between the North and South?
Well, I suppose it's predictably unpredictable. It's a dangerous time on the peninsula, but then it's been a dangerous time for 60 years. This is part of a pattern. The North Koreans have been described by a scholar friend of mine as perhaps the perfect modern Machiavellians. The danger, the added danger, of course, is one of miscalculation.
What do you mean by miscalculation?
Well, so far there really has been a soft response from the right-leaning South Korean regime. First of all, to the immense provocation of the sinking of the torpedo boat, 46 sailors dead, and secondly, a soft response to this artillery bombardment. There's been the resignation of the defence minister, and there's been some change in the rules of engagement as to the harshness of response of the South Koreans to further North Korean attacks. But there doesn't seem to be, in fact there would be an immense reluctance of South Korea to tip this into an outbreak of war. Seoul, superb modern city, is really only a short bus ride from the DMZ, the line of disengagement. North Korean artillery could obliterate the capital of what's probably the world's 10th biggest economy in a matter of half an hour or so.
It's only about 50 kilometres, if I remember correctly, between Seoul and that border that you mentioned, and yet so many South Koreans have never been there, in a way just see the North as a complete foreign entity.
Well, one of the sadnesses in South Korea is that it is a divided country. Families are divided. After the end of World War II, Korea expected to be a united country, as they had been for century after century before the Japanese swallowed them whole in 1905. There still is a deep longing, a feeling of national sadness about that division. But as you say, it's more solid than an iron curtain, basically. And apart from stage-managed reunions, there is no sign of the reunification of Korea, which I think both sides, I mean, the ordinary people on both sides dearly want.
I have to ask you, you wrote in your book about the dilemma facing President Eisenhower over whether to use atomic weapons in a bid to conquer North Korea or settle for a mediated ceasefire. Do you think using atomic weapons would have solved the conflict?
No, indeed not. In fact, it would have brought on what President Truman had worried about. It certainly would have brought on World War III. Had that happened, you've got to remember at this stage the Soviet Union had its own nuclear capability, and it's hard to see how in the terrain nuclear weapons would have been a great tactical weapon. But strategically, it would have been a disaster for Korea, a disaster for the whole world.
Could there be a change with a new leader in the DPRK, even if the new leader happens to be the son of the old leader?
Look, there are enigmas within enigmas in North Korea. The young leader, the dear young leader of B, is only 28, so obviously he, to some extent, a crown prince, is a puppet of the old hardened regime. It's difficult to see any change there, partly because it's, as with many dictatorial regimes, Burma for example, the whole idea behind their actions is perpetuation of their rule, of keeping their power, of keeping themselves secure in power.
Just briefly, Cameron Forbes, you described the conflict as the forgotten war. What role did Australia play in that conflict back in the 1950s?
Australia played a small role but punched way above its weight. For a start, the 77 Squadron Mustangs were terribly important in the early stages of the war. They had a range which their replacement jet fighters didn't have. And the Australian battalions fought two iconic battles. One, certainly, Capillon, probably helped tip the scales in the Fifth Communist Offensive, which would have seen Seoul fall again, which possibly would have led to the United Nations allies being driven down to a small perimeter and even possibly pushed off the peninsula. It would have been a totally communist peninsula and this incredibly strategic bit of territory.
Cameron Forbes, author of The Korean War, thanks so much for coming in this morning.
My pleasure.